Welcome, everybody, to the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast. Welcome, everybody, to the Leaders Leading Leaders podcast. I'm your host, John Espinosa. Thank you for choosing to spend the time to listen to the podcast. If you like what you hear, please do me a favor and click on that subscribe button. It helps get this message out to as many people that need it, and ultimately it helps meet our mission of getting others to where they're going. Today I want to talk about an important topic surrounding diversity and inclusion. I was part of a meeting today and I listened to some great leaders. It was a panel discussion and this topic of diversity and inclusion got brought up. And the theme was around diversity and inclusion of thought, of thinkers, including those that think differently than we do. It didn't center around race or ethnicity, which a lot of times when you hear diversity and inclusion, that's where our minds go. But this conversation was very insightful and it got me thinking. As leaders in organizations, do you surround yourself with diverse thinkers or people that are just going to agree with you all the time and say yes? And that's a tough question for us as leaders. As we create our teams, as we surround ourselves with other people, are they like-minded? How like-minded are they? Or do you have a team that you all sit around the table and it's like a family, right? I mean, you get some disagreement that's going on. You get some diverse thoughts and thinkers that, may not see it the same way that others see it around the table. And for me, as a leader, as a young leader, I gravitated towards everyone agree on, what was said. The leader sitting at the front of the table, you just shook your head and said, yeah, that's a great idea. I agree with that. We need to do that. But was that the right way? Was that as the senior leader in the room, as the leader sitting at the front of the table, or however you position yourself in your organization? Is that what you want? Is that what we want as leaders, to have yes people that surround us? Is that going to meet the mission of the organization? Is that going to meet your goals? Are we better because of that environment? In my example and in my experience, the organization was not better when you had a leader that didn't value the diverse thinking that was happening even on their own teams. So let's look at the other example. You have a leader that comes into a room. I had a leader one time. They never sat at the front of the table. They always sat themselves in the middle somewhere in the situation. And that sent a message to me. I can remember the very first time that I walked in the room and they were sitting normally instead of the front, they were in the middle of the table. And I began to think, well, this is different. And the meeting started and the leader would ask questions and they would give a great pause, as people were thinking, processing the question, processing how they were going to deliver the information. And they would just sit there. They were calm. They were cool, they were collected, and they waited. And I'm sure for that leader, it felt like forever. But it was almost like someone waved a magic wand around the table, because no more than a couple minutes that went by, and somebody spoke up. And then somebody added to that. And then somebody disagreed with the two individuals that had spoken first. And then somebody backed that person up. And there was such a good conversation that occurred. I can remember this vividly. I want to be like that. I want to be that leader that isn't the one who, I always tell people as leaders, don't be the most interesting person in the room. Be the most interested person in the room. And that takes some work. It did for me. I struggled with that. I really did. As a young leader, as a new leader coming into an organization, I really struggled with being interested in, that's not to say interested in people's personal lives, but interested on how the organization evolved, where it came from, where we were now, how we got there, and how we can use that information to move forward. But it's because of the diversity of thought and the willingness for a leader to allow that in a room, in a meeting, in the organization, if we want to, start building bigger. It meant a lot to me as a member of that team, as a young leader growing up in the organization. Throughout my leadership journey, I've had some leaders that have not been so good at that, and I've had some really great leaders. And just looking at myself, I fall somewhere in between. I really do. I'm always striving to be better. I'm always striving to make sure that others feel included. I'm always striving to allow people to process the information, because that moment of silence, it seems like a moment, and maybe it's a minute, maybe it's 2 minutes, but when I'm leading the meetings and I'm trying to get information, we are very fast paced in the organization that I currently work in, but sometimes you got to slow down to go far. And once the team realizes that, once your organization becomes a diverse thinking organization, that's when the organization grows. That's when you see the new thought come out around where processes need to be automated, or maybe we're doing something that we've always done and we don't need to do that anymore. But until people feel the ability to come out and voice their opinion, those things don't get brought to light. So it's very important as leaders. And, I've had organizations that I felt the inclusion factor really high, scale of 1 to 10, like 9, 10. And then I felt organizations, and I've been in organizations where I felt the inclusion factor around 3 to 4. And I would rather work in the organization that is higher in that inclusion factor. What makes the difference? It's the leader. It really is. Is the leader open to hearing thoughts, opinions of others that surround them? As the leaders of our organizations and our teams, we don't need to be the smartest person in the room. We don't need to ask the question and then answer our own question. That's why we build our teams. That's why we build them with the subject matter experts, and we depend on people, and we trust, and we create that environment to where others feel included enough to where they have a seat at the table. Nobody sits on the wall or outside the table. Everybody's at the table in my rooms. Everybody. And it allows them to share their thoughts, to share their opinions, and everybody knows around that table that their opinion and their thoughts are equal. And that doesn't happen overnight. We as leaders need to work on that, consistently work on that. Sometimes, you have a situation, you have a bad meeting. I'm not saying everything is going to be hunky and dory, but, focus on that as leaders, focus on the good, and then allow that diverse thinking to happen. One thing I do want to talk about is, as leaders, I did the scale from 1 to 10. And for me, I've always heard this relatability factor that as a leader who sees themselves as a 6 on a scale from 10, they will only attract at that same level or below. So think about that. If I'm trying to build a team and surround myself with diverse thinkers, if I have a 6 mindset as a leader, I'm only going to get 6s or below. And a lot of times at the 6 level, they're not thinking very diversely. They don't feel as if they're included in the organization or in the conversation or the decision making, because that's another big piece. So are you a 6 or are you that 9 out of 10 leader who now what you're doing is now you got a big gap there. I'm attracting 9s in my team that are sitting around the table that I'm allowing to share their thoughts, their opinions. I'm fostering that environment of inclusion to where those diverse individuals bring information to the table, and we, the collective we, make a decision together. So 3 things that I want to share just from my experiences that really helped me get in that mindset of sitting in the middle of the table and allowing diverse thoughts. The first one, check your thoughts and assumptions. We all have biases. Sometimes they're hidden, sometimes they're not. And an example of this is, just think of when your best friend tells you a story about your childhood, and what do? You begin to start judging. Well, or make excuses. So check those assumptions and check those thoughts. It's important whenever, we get into those rooms with other individuals, specifically when you have somebody who's talking or sharing their opinion that is opposite of yours. So check those. Listen intent. That's the second one. Make sure that active listening, whatever you want to call it. I know there's a lot of buzzwords that go around, but for me, listening looks like I am intently looking at the individual who is speaking, and I am consuming that information. I'm not thinking about what my next thought is going to be or the next word that's coming out of my mind or my mouth. I quiet my mind and I listen to that individual wholeheartedly. And again, remember, I'm checking those assumptions. We're humans. We bring in our biases to the situations, but I leave that out. And I'm intently listening to those individuals that are speaking. And then the third one is strive to be a 10. Everybody that's listening to this podcast can be a 10. 10 out of 10 leader. If you're a 10 out of 10, that means that you are attracting the best and brightest to sit at the table with you, not for you, with you, and share their thoughts, share their ideas. Make sure that we are making the best possible decision that we possibly can. That's what I'm striving to be, a 10 out of a 10 leader. So 3 things to get a diverse and inclusive leadership mindset. 1, check your thoughts and assumptions. 2, make sure that you're listening intently. And 3, always be striving to be a 10. I hope this helps somebody today. Go out and lead those teams. Go be great. We'll talk to everyone later. Bye-bye. If you enjoy what you're hearing, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps us get others to where they're going.